My name is Rosamund Fletcher, and the last thing I expected that night was to hear my father's laugh cut through the rehearsal dinner like a blade. "She's only in the airborne to sweep the floors," he said, glancing at me with that dismissive smirk I'd known my whole life. The room erupted in laughter, and I froze, a cocktail of shame, rage, and disbelief twisting in my chest. Years of proving myself, of earning respect in skies and deserts he'd never seen, had vanished in a single cruel sentence. That was the moment I realized nothing he ever thought of me mattered, except what I was about to make them see. I grew up in the quiet mountains of Asheville, North Carolina, where the air always smelled faintly of pine and the mornings were wrapped in a soft mist. I spent my childhood in the constant shadow of Eleanor, my older sister, who seemed to glide through every room and every achievement like the sun itself, drawing attention and praise effortlessly. At 8, 9, 10, I learned early that no matter what I did, it was never enough in my father's eyes. Gregory Fletcher, a man whose presence filled any room with authority, seemed to reserve every ounce of pride for Eleanor. When I came home from softball practice, sweaty and triumphant from hitting the winning run, he barely looked up from his newspaper. "That's nice, Rosamund," he muttered, his words flat and distant. "Don't get cocky." Then he'd turn to Eleanor, asking about her piano recital or her latest academic award, and the warmth he reserved for her would fill the space I wished were mine. My mother, Helen, tried in her gentle, quiet way. She'd tuck an extra cookie into my lunch bag or brush a strand of hair behind my ear with a whispered, "I'm proud of you." But even her affection couldn't compete with my father's casual dismissal. Graduation nights were the cruelest reminders. Eleanor's name called, thunderous applause filling the room. Mine came, a polite golf clap at best, the echo of attention that never reached me. Those moments, the quiet sting of invisibility, carved themselves into my heart. And yet, the isolation and the weight of being overlooked became the fire that would shape me. Every glance I caught of my father's indifferent eyes, every laugh that wasn't mine to share, steeled something in me. I swore silently then, in those mountain-lit halls, that I would find my own way to matter, that I would create a life where my worth was undeniable, not because anyone chose to see it, but because I would make them impossible to ignore. The sun pressed down on us like a relentless overseer as I climbed the steel tower at Fort Liberty. Every muscle burned from push-ups, every breath felt heavier than the last, and the red clay stuck to my skin like a second layer of armor. The drill sergeant barked commands with a voice that could cut through metal, his eyes sharp but occasionally softened by a hint of dark humor. "Move! Faster! Don't even think about quitting!" Each word landed with precision, testing not just my body, but the limits of my mind. I whispered to myself under the roar of the wind, "Don't quit. Don't give him the satisfaction." The first jump was a terror unlike any I had known. Heart-hammering, stomach-twisting, the world falling away beneath me. And yet, when the parachute opened and I floated down, the calm spread across me, fierce and affirming. Sweat stung my eyes, my shoulders ached, and the red clay had soaked through every layer, but the metal jump wings pinned to my chest felt warm in my hands, a quiet proof of what I had earned. Even as I sent letters home, recounting every grueling drill and every successful jump, I knew my father's attention would still be elsewhere. Gregory Fletcher's pride was reserved for Eleanor alone, and no medal, no badge, no story of courage could bridge that invisible divide. Deployment hit harder than training ever could. Iraq's deserts stretched endlessly, dust thick in the air, the sun baking every inch of exposed skin. Afghanistan's mountains swallowed us whole, freezing winds cutting through layers of gear as radios crackled with distant commands. We moved with purpose, every step measured, every face memorized. Comrades, villagers, even the loyal dog that followed us along rocky passes. Loss came quietly, but often, etched into our hearts, a patch of grief carried under stone before we could move forward. I wrote home when I could, detailing missions, describing sunsets that bled like molten gold, the courage of those around me, the friends who never returned. And yet, Gregory Fletcher remained indifferent, his focus unwavering on Eleanor's achievements. The letters meant nothing to him. The sacrifices, the danger, the discipline, they vanished in the shadow of his favoritism. Then came the envelope that made my chest tighten. Eleanor's wedding invitation. The elegant script and delicate calligraphy were a polite reminder that I would face him again soon, under the same roof, with all my earned proof of valor still invisible in his eyes. My resolve hardened. I would not crumble. I would be seen. The hall smelled of fried chicken and sweet tea, a warm yellow light pooling over long tables draped in crisp white linens. Paper invitations and calligraphy menus sat neatly at each place, the soft shuffle of folding chairs mingling with murmurs of conversation. I stood at the end of the room, uniform pressed, ribbons and jump wings gleaming under the overhead lights. Pride and anxiety twisted together in my chest as I scanned the crowd. Neighbors, family friends, a few shadowed faces I recognized from my military past, deliberately keeping their distance. Then my father, Gregory Fletcher, rose to speak. His eyes flicked over the room with practiced charm before landing on me. "You all know my oldest daughter, Eleanor, right? Brilliant, flawless, the pride of the family. And Rosamund, 82nd Airborne, huh? I'm sure she just sweeps the floors there." Laughter rolled around the room. Some were polite, some cruel, a few uncertain. I felt my hands tighten on the edge of the chair. My mother, Helen, pressed her palm lightly against mine, her eyes urging me to stay steady. Eleanor passed by, her smile tight and fragile, eyes cast away, an unspoken distance that had never quite disappeared. And then I caught Jackson Harper's gaze. The man Eleanor was soon to marry. No laughter, no mockery, just quiet, intense attention, like he could see every hardship, every sacrifice I'd endured. The humiliation stung deep. I wanted to vanish, to melt into the floor. But something in Jackson's steady look suggested a shift, an unspoken promise that the story wasn't over yet. The dinner continued, plates scraping softly against the table, the faint clink of silverware, low conversations threading through the room. I stayed at my seat, focusing on the small, steady rhythm of my own breathing, anchoring myself against the sting of my father's words. I had made my choice. I would not answer cruelty with confrontation. My response would be action, visible, undeniable, measured. My mother's hand lingered briefly on mine, her silent reassurance grounding me. Eleanor moved about the room, subtly adjusting chairs and centerpieces, her nervousness a mirror of the tension in the hall. Jackson Harper remained seated nearby, eyes tracking my every subtle movement, reading the story behind my expression, the weight of my past in the way I carried myself. I drew in a slow breath, feeling the soft friction of the chair beneath me and the hum of murmurs around the room. The ambient noise, the faint scrape of chairs, the gentle clatter of cutlery, the occasional whispered conversation, heightened the tension rather than dulled it. I had to choose: rise and confront, or remain still and let the moment build. I stayed seated. I observed. I waited. The anticipation coiled through the room, a current that set the stage for the unfolding twist. Jackson's unwavering attention suggested that when the right moment came, every eye would shift, and every assumption would be challenged. The room fell into a hush as Jackson Harper stood, gripping the microphone, eyes fixed firmly on me. The warm yellow light glinted off the polished ribbons on my uniform, but it was his steady gaze that drew every ounce of attention. "I haven't known Rosamund long," he began, his voice clear over the soft murmur of the crowd. "But I know she has done hard things for others, and for people she will never meet." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the guests. Then, casually, he asked about my parachute jumps. I counted aloud. 27, 28, if you count the one that ended in the mud-filled ditch. The reaction was instantaneous. Curiosity shifted to awe, then to genuine respect. My mother's hand found mine, her eyes glistening with unspoken pride. Eleanor lingered nearby, awkward, but beginning to register the scope of what I had accomplished. Of course, my father tried to reclaim control. "Oh, you'll hear plenty more stories from her soon," he interjected, a mocking lilt in his tone. The room fell silent, tension coiling like a spring. Then a few faces in the back came into focus. Fellow service members, some old colleagues, standing discreetly, lending weight to Jackson's words. The tide had shifted. For the first time, the power in the room was not his to command. Yet Gregory still clung to the edges of authority, a faint smirk of disbelief masking the uncertainty settling in. Jackson gestured, deliberate, and said, "Front and center." I stepped forward, shoulders squared, chin high, the embodiment of every lesson learned under fire and discipline. He lifted his hand in a salute. Subtle, civilian, but rich with respect. A ripple passed through the room. The flower girl mirrored the gesture. A few more guests rose hesitantly, eyes serious, reverent. The scrape of chairs, the faint intake of breath, and the soft background music gave the moment a rhythm, a heartbeat shared by everyone present. The domino effect unfolded as more stood, each act of acknowledgement layering over the last. My father watched, frustration and disbelief etched into his features. His habitual dominance faltered. My mother and Eleanor's eyes met mine, a silent recognition of my worth. The depth of their acknowledgement, unspoken yet undeniable. The stage was set, the room's attention had shifted, and the power dynamics that had long favored my father were now inverted. Every gaze, every gesture built the anticipation for what was to come, priming the audience for the coming resolution. The hall had grown impossibly quiet, the warm yellow light pooling over neatly arranged tables, the faint scent of sweet tea and fried chicken still lingering in the air. Every eye in the room seemed to fix on me as I stepped forward, moving toward the center with measured calm, shoulders squared, chin high, my uniform crisp, ribbons and jump wings catching the light. I felt the weight of every training hour, every mission, every sacrifice settle into a single, steady stance. Front and center. I was no longer the overlooked daughter in the shadows. I was visibility incarnate, a presence forged in discipline and determination. Jackson Harper lifted his hand in a subtle, civilian-style salute, his eyes unwavering, conveying respect deeper than words could hold. It was quiet, deliberate, yet it carried a force that reshaped the room's energy. The flower girl at the corner mirrored him almost instinctively, tiny hand raised with solemn seriousness. A ripple passed through the guests, old family friends, neighbors, even distant relatives, standing hesitantly at first, then with growing conviction. A few of my fellow service members, previously hidden in the crowd, straightened in their seats, and the domino effect gathered momentum. The soft scrape of chairs, the collective intake of breath, the faint background hum of music created a rhythm, a heartbeat shared by all. My mother's eyes glistened as her hand brushed mine in quiet pride. Eleanor's expression softened. The rigid lines of her practiced composure melted into acknowledgement, her gaze holding a silent apology and respect. From across the room, my father's face tightened. Gregory Fletcher, long accustomed to wielding authority effortlessly, could only watch as the power he had claimed so casually slipped through his fingers. The laughter, the whispers, the polite smirks, everything shifted. Eyes that had been doubtful or indifferent now traced every motion I made, reflecting reverence and recognition. There was no need for a speech, no dramatics, no loud declarations. Every gesture, the salute, the stance, the quiet dignity, spoke volumes. In that moment, the balance of authority was inverted, the public acknowledgement of my worth, earned through years of effort and perseverance, outweighed every dismissive word that had ever tried to diminish me. Every breath, every glance, Every subtle movement amplified the unspoken truth. I was seen, I mattered, and the room was bearing witness. This was the apex, the emotional climax, front and center. I became more than a daughter or a sister. I became a testament to the strength of perseverance, the quiet power of recognition, and the authority of one who has earned it through action rather than expectation. The hall had settled into a quiet murmur. The earlier tension diffused into soft conversations. The golden light, now gentle, almost forgiving. I found myself standing across from my father, Gregory Fletcher, the air between us taut, electric, with years of unspoken words and unresolved judgments. The room felt suspended, each guest giving us a sliver of attention, though polite restraint kept them from intruding. He sighed, the lines on his face deeper than any shadow the light could cast. "You come from a place," he began slowly, carefully, "that I've never known how to guide. I made jokes because I didn't know how to say what needed to be said." His voice was softer than I had ever heard, stripped of bravado, leaving only raw, uneasy honesty. I met his gaze steadily, letting the silence stretch between us. "You didn't guide, Father," I replied evenly, my voice calm but unwavering. "You held a picture of me in your mind, one that never matched who I am. I've lived my life according to my own truth. I've earned it, in ways you never saw, and I will continue to stand by it." My mother's eyes, warm and patient, met mine briefly, her hand brushing the edge of mine. A subtle encouragement that this moment, however long overdue, was ours to navigate. Eleanor lingered near us, her expression tangled, awkward, guilty, yet slowly softening into recognition. She no longer looked away. Her glance was an acknowledgement, fragile but sincere. There were no raised voices, no confrontational accusations, no declarations meant to shame. Only the truth, unadorned, holding its own weight. Every word, every pause, every quiet intake of breath confirmed what had long been unseen. My worth was undeniable, my achievements real, and my perseverance authentic. The room seemed to lean in imperceptibly, as if the walls themselves were listening. No one needed to applaud, to murmur approval, or to weigh in. The acknowledgement was subtle, almost invisible, yet absolute. I felt the years of invisible labor, the sacrifices, the fear, and the determination solidify into clarity. My life, my actions, and my presence demanded recognition, whether my father had it in him to offer or not. Closure arrived not in forgiveness, but in understanding. The gap between expectation and reality, between disappointment and accomplishment, had been named and acknowledged. In that quiet exchange, the power balance had shifted, not with confrontation, but with integrity, truth, and dignity. I stood tall, and for the first time in decades, the weight of invisibility lifted. I was seen, fully and without compromise. The wedding unfolded in a gentle cascade of sunlight and warm golden tones, laughter mingling with soft music, creating a rhythm that carried the guests through the ceremony and reception. I walked beside Jackson Harper, hand firmly clasped in his, each step deliberate, steady, imbued with the confidence I had spent years cultivating. Every gaze that met mine carried recognition, some hesitant at first, some wide-eyed with awe, but all reflecting the truth I had fought to make visible. My mother, Helen, stood close, her eyes luminous with pride. The quiet strength she had always offered now fully aligned with the reality of my accomplishments. Eleanor lingered beside her, awkward at first, yet gradually letting the acknowledgement of my perseverance soften the tension that had shadowed our lives for decades. Their presence, steady and genuine, was a validation more potent than any words could convey. Across the room, my father remained seated, his posture stiff, a faint shadow of disbelief on his face. The authority he had long wielded effortlessly now felt diminished. He watched as the currents of respect and admiration flowed around me, a silent witness to the power of integrity and earned recognition. Small gestures carried weight. The flower girl, her pink dress brushing the floor, offered me the first slice of cake, a tiny emblem of the acknowledgement that had been withheld for so long. Guests rose to toast, some with subtle nods, others with gentle smiles, their eyes conveying congratulations without a single grand proclamation. The room's energy shifted organically, the quiet acknowledgement of my worth creating a resonance that no words could replicate. There was no triumphal speech, no dramatic flourish. All recognition came through actions, glances, and unspoken gestures, a symphony of understanding and respect that reinforced the depth of the moment. The power dynamic had been inverted not through confrontation, but through demonstration of true merit, visible to all present. In that serene unfolding, I understood the profound lesson that had threaded through every hardship, every jump, every moment of invisibility. My value was never determined by the judgment of others, but by the strength, courage, and persistence I carried within. True recognition comes from those who witness and respect your effort, not from those who would dismiss it. Walking through the crowd, hand in hand with Jackson, supported by my mother and sister, I felt the weight of decades lift, replaced with a calm certainty. I had been seen, I had been acknowledged, and in that recognition, I found a peace that was both rare and absolute. The journey had been long, but now, fully present in this moment of quiet celebration, the closure was complete.